For Labor Day weekend 2016, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, will Medicaid be expanded in Georgia? Sheriff Victor Hill cops a plea, and the mosque is coming to Newton County. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this holiday weekend. Hope everyone's enjoyed some water, some beach, some sun, what have you, but we're here, and we're going to talk to you about the issues, whether you like it or not. So we begin in the state of Georgia, and we've been hearing this now for 3 years, that Medicaid in the state needs to be expanded at a cost of untold millions, Phil. And the problem is the feds send money, as Jeff likes to point out, but eventually Georgia bears the whole burden. This is said to be an issue in January when the General Assembly comes back. Why won't it go away?
Well, it won't go away because the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and I think rightly so, added to the conversation about maybe some baby steps for Medicaid coverage. And I think you're not going to get full expansion. You're right. It is very expensive. Governor Deal and the leaders of the General Assembly have said we can't afford it. But I think that the conversation has started.
I think, Jeff, when 3 or 4 well-known Republican legislators get behind it, in this case Senator Renee Unterman and others, it gives it a much better chance of passage in combination with the Democrat votes that are already there.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at rural Georgia and the closure of hospitals, because they just don't have the funding. They don't have the federal funding, they don't have the state funding. Constituents are starting to put a lot of pressure on their legislators to do something about this situation. And we've seen it time and time again. Governor stepped in the last year or two with a bill to try to rescue some of these hospitals that have been struggling. It wasn't enough. And we're going to have some huge infusion of funds, and a lot of that is federal funding, in order to move forward. We are doing a tremendous disservice to hundreds of thousands of Georgia citizens by not expanding Medicaid, as has happened in other states. Even the Republican vice presidential candidate Mike Pence has expanded Medicaid in his state, Indiana. And we're seeing it in Arkansas and elsewhere, conservative states, where they've come up with some hybrid.
Yeah, they're different models.
Yes,
they're different
that's exactly
models.
right, but they've come up with some hybrid that allows folks.
And the Georgia Chamber bases it on income, from what I read of the report that they've sent to the General Assembly.
They've given 3 scenarios, and one of them is based on income.
Right,
and it would add something like 600,000 Georgians to the insured rolls, and it would bring millions of federal funding into the state. And if they had done it, 4 years ago, we would be much further along. Those hospitals would have been saved, and people would have been taken care of.
People on that side of the argument say, well, 90% of the dollars are covered by the feds. But that's for only 10 years.
Only
At the end of 10 years, it's all on the states.
Right.
But by that time, the economy will have grown. Everybody will have gotten
we don't know that.
So you're agreeing Trump is the next president?
No, I'm not.
You said the economy will have grown. It certainly won't grow under Hillary Clinton anymore than it has under Barack Obama. 1.1% domestic annual growth.
Well, it's a huge hole in the budget. It's going to be a huge hole in the budget if you just waved the magic wand and did that years ago. That's what
I don't know which country you all live in. Barack Obama has saved the American economy.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
From Republicans.
1.1 growth?
From Republicans. Saved it.
1.1 economic growth?
At 1.1% economic growth. How about 50% unemployment? What about, do you remember? You don't remember 2009.
Let me change the subject.
The Bush administration.
It was actually greedy bankers who caused the recession. I didn't get a chance to say that last week.
Republicans too.
Because Democrats refused to reform Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That caused the housing collapse. That caused the depression. Period. End of report.
Which was led by President Bush, who wanted everybody to have a home and encouraged Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to do what they did.
It's always Bush's fault. Yeah,
it's always the Republicans' fault because they believe in the 1%
Let me turn to a story Phil broke on this broadcast, and that is whether Secretary Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State, was going to give in to the feds as they apparently attempt to take over all local and state elections. Now Kemp has been named to a task force to work with the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Well, that's right. In fact, as you know, I've spoken with Secretary Kemp, and he was very adamant that he's against a federal Homeland Security takeover of not just Georgia's election system, but all 50 states. That's traditionally been a local thing. Sure, we can get assistance and advice from the feds.
Well, so you want the money, but you don't want the oversight.
But I don't want the control, and I don't want any Republican or Democrat Justice Department sending its lawyers here telling us Georgians what to do, and you ought to be on my side on this one.
I'm going to tell you what we ought to be able to do.
You want President Trump to send in Justice Department lawyers? We ought to have a secure and reliable electronic voting system. And right now we don't.
We're using old technology. My understanding is
that
we're
is
using
a terrible
software
accusation.
from 20 years ago.
That's an outrageous accusation.
And it's easy to
proof. It's easy.
There's not a trace of evidence.
That is actually very irresponsible on your part.
You do know that it is 20 years old.
Where do you get that proof?
What version of Windows are you using?
Alexis,
are you
let's have a
using Windows
conversation.
2000?
Where do you get proof of that outrage?
All right, guys.
Using Windows
He
2000
didn't want to
on
answer.
your
He didn't want to
computer?
answer. That's
Well,
outrageous.
there's no trace of any kind of election fraud. What we do have is certain counties that can't get the job done.
I didn't
namely
make any
Fulton and
reference
DeKalb.
to election fraud. I made
Talking
You
about
said it wasn't
technology.
to
secure.
the possibility
You said it
of
wasn't
our
secure.
No, now he's
systems
backtracking.
being hacked by computer hackers because we use old technology. It's an easy thing to do. What decade do you all live in?
You know, you have completely missed the whole point of this.
Well,
Well,
no, but the point is
when-
the technology needs to be up to date.
Let me just say this. When we created the Homeland Security Department after 9/11, I thought that was a decent idea, particularly to protect our airports and that sort of thing. Whoever dreamed that Homeland Security would look into local voting in Jasper County or
Well,
that's
there's a bigger
because-
picture here.
because
It's presidential
the Republicans
overreach.
keep talking about voter fraud, and so therefore it's on everybody's mind now. But you don't like it when it goes against what you wanted to do.
I think you ought to remember, if you're in favor of all of these constitutional overreaches by a White House, if President Trump gets in, you need to be worried about presidential overreach then.
Well, thank
right,
the
we
good
gotta get
Lord
out.
he won't.
Maybe you all
let's
just
get
want
out.
Vladimir Putin to come in.
No, that's absurd.
Anyway, I'm kind of glad that Kemp is on that task force since we know where he stands on
He's a
it.
watchdog.
Yeah, that's good. At least we got a set of eyes on the problem. When we come back, we'll turn to some local news. One of the Georgia Gang's Hall of Famers, Victor Hill, is back in the news. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
You know, it occurred to me, we've been on the air for 35 years.
Whoa.
And we probably should have a Hall of Fame on the Georgia Gang. I can suggest several examples, but one of them clearly would be Sheriff Victor Hill in Clayton County. Last week we reported on a lawsuit that he lost, cost the county a bunch of money. This week in Gwinnett County, he played a road game, not in his home county of Clayton, and he pleaded nolo contendere to a gunshot that was fired into a female friend of his, a woman. And Danny Porter, the DA in Gwinnett County, Phil, said, hey, it was what everybody gets if they shoot somebody accidentally.
Well, I think you ought to rename it to the Hall of Infamy,
Thank you.
number one. But number two, he's still not out of hot water, however, because there's something called POST, which is the Law Enforcement Accrediting Agency, and I hope they slap a sanction on him. He's just one of the worst sheriffs in the state of Georgia.
He was showing police tactics to this real estate agent in Gwinnett County.
And she was also last we heard, she was also put on the Clayton County Sheriff's Department payroll. How about that?
Forgotten that. So that's another notch on the Hall of Fame credentials. That's pretty good. Hall of Infamy credentials. All right. Now in Newton County, which is undergoing that transition from rural to more urban, has been for years, is changing. The commission there must have watched the Georgia Gang last week because a majority of the commissioners said, guess what? We don't have much choice but to accept this mosque. What do you think, Jeff? All of us were in rare agreement on that.
Yeah, no, we were, and I don't know where they were out there on that. I mean, you had some folks, one commissioner in particular who was known for making some racist, misogynist Facebook comments a year ago who didn't want it in his district. And, you know, they're just looking pretty xenophobic out there, I think, at this point in Newton County over this issue.
Well, they passed that moratorium.
Somebody was passing around a flyer that said, a good Muslim can't be a good American?
Well, there was problems on both sides. You had CARE, this very fanatical Muslim
stop.
organization,
It's
stirring
not
things up too.
fanatical.
So both sides had a problem. And also, I think it's good. Let's bring in the imam. It's the Doraville.
He seems
mosque.
willing to cooperate and work with people.
And, you know, yeah, and I think, and to set a bigger picture, and I know you all know this, but just for our viewers, there's good imams and good mosques in this country, and then there's radicals in some of these mosques who hate
That's
this
true
country.
Baptists.
And you know,
Yeah.
I'm going to. There's good and bad everywhere. So that's not the point here. The point
What
is
is the
we need to
point?
watch. We need to watch what goes on in these mosques.
Fundamentalist
Oh,
Baptists
please,
aren't
stop
preaching
it.
terror
We
and
need to watch what
jihad.
goes on in these
Oh, no.
churches.
Anyway, I mean, not the Baptists. That's off the chart.
They're not blowing up buildings.
Yeah,
They're killing people. They're
Muslims
shooting
are
people.
preaching terror in some places. In some places.
They're in denial.
I'm not
denial?
you're in denial.
Muslims,
about,
you
and
know,
what about
that
the
have a
radical?
radical
What about
streak.
radical Christians who go
Muslims-
around shooting people and killing people?
Which is
that-
a bigger threat in this country?
Anybody who shoots anybody is a bigger
I
threat.
think
What do you think?
radical Muslims are the bigger threat.
All right,
That's
let
a
me change the
terrible thing to
subject,
say. What's
and
a
I'm going to
bigger
skip
threat?
ahead here because
Anybody
you're
getting
worried about
killed.
these gun-toting Americans. Judge in Fulton County says you can't carry a gun into Atlanta's Botanical Garden. I thought we'd passed a law that you could, you know, if you have a permit, you can carry your gun into public places. That was Judge Gail Tucson. What do you think, Alexis?
Well, I think she ruled that it's because it's a private park, but it's based, you know, on the basis for the suit was that the fact that the park is located on public land.
Right.
But they have rules and regulations governing the conduct at this private park. So the judge just said she tossed it. She
You know,
I
said
don't
they-
think it's gonna
Carry.org,
stand.
Whatever it is
Georgia
trying to test this
Carry.
everywhere.
Georgia
Georgia Carry is
Carry.
trying to carry this. Is trying to test this wherever they can. So this was a good test case for them because you've got this hybrid where you've got public land, a private organization leasing public land. It was
I agree with that. It'll be appealed.
You had a
It'll be
ruling that I
appealed.
think is going to be appealed, and it had been before it went to the Georgia Supreme Court, got knocked back down. It's going to go back up on other grounds.
Changing the subject yet again, what did Faulkner say in the South? The past isn't even the past?
Yeah,
Or something like that. I'm botching the great quote.
but that's the gist.
But what I thought about that when I read this story first broken by Atlanta Progressive News. Pretty amazing, isn't it? An obscure website.
That's a good little
they do
left-wing
a good
website.
job. Those left wingers know how to break some news.
And they have some information.
So we've got this story about Mims Park down by the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and it looks to be sort of a family affair. Rodney Mims Cook Jr. wants to spend a lot of money on the park and put up statues of great civil rights leaders, Andy Young,
From the
Martin
area.
Luther King Jr., etc., and his great-grandfather, Rodney Mims, who was once the mayor of Atlanta back in the 1800s. Have I got all that right?
Almost. There's two Mimses that he wanted to put statues on. His father, who was a friend of Andy Young's, and even though they were political
Competitors.
opponents, and then going back in the family lineage, a Confederate Mims.
Who was the mayor of Atlanta and a major in the Confederate
Those were the
Army.
two statues, and Rodney Mims Cook Jr. said, okay, we won't do the Confederate statue, but I want my father. And Andy Young and some other prominent people said, let's go ahead. I think it's $10 million for this very nice park. And all of a sudden, a few radicals saying, wait, no, stop, we don't want the park.
Well, it's a park in an area, Jeff,
They didn't
that
say
we
they didn't want the park. They said they didn't want the tributes to Confederates in the park.
Well, but he agreed with that.
But he was honoring him for being mayor of Atlanta.
But I think
They still don't want it. They
Well-
don't like the name Mims.
But you know, that area needs that park. That's the area where there was all
Right.
the flooding
It
of
was
the
$10
homes.
million
Oh,
investment.
And that's a
150
private
homes.
investment of $10 million that could do wonders for
that area.
rehabbing that whole neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that most
guy
people
was
think-
the mayor.
Right, and he was. I mean, so you can't erase history, but you can depend on how you shape it. Or
So
how
you're
you,
opposed to the park, even
I'm
though he
not-
said he's not
No,
going to
no,
do the
she's not
statue?
saying
Okay.
that.
I'm not opposed
So-
to the park. I'm just agreeing with the sort of compromise that they've come up
Okay,
with.
good.
All right, before
And
we
I-
turn, we got to get out of this one and turn to politics. Get your vocal cords warmed up, folks. But two quick local items. Governor Deal announced that 1,100 jobs will come to DeKalb County, Jeff. Not too far from where you live, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Near Lithonia. 1,100 jobs in the home meal preparation
This
business.
is the new economy.
I'm just so glad to have DeKalb get some big,
Yes.
a big job producer. It's wonderful. And I think that's all I've got on that. Yeah, it's all right.
Nobody's going to cook anymore. It's a wonderful thing. You just order your food. online and they deliver it to you.
You know,
Here's your lunch, here's your dinner.
It's pricey,
It's amazing.
but it is good, I got to say.
Well, if you,
the
if
services
you need
I've
that
used.
kind of service, but I think that is again, the disruption that is happening in the economy.
There you go. Right.
And pretty soon you can
So,
get it from Walmart too.
we're going to talk about the economy because when we come back, we're going to talk about politics. You know what that'll lead to. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
There's such a din and racket from the presidential campaign that it's almost easy to forget there are other names on that ballot come November 8th. And we come to Johnny Isakson, Georgia's senior senator. He has said, as we mentioned last week, that he'll only have one debate, and that's just before the election with the press club. Now I notice that his Democratic opponent, Jim Barksdale, the guy with the cap, it's not a hat, it's a cap. We got to straighten him out on that, okay? That thing he wears on his head is a cap. It's not a hat. You with me?
Gotcha.
Okay, all right. Anyway, Barksdale wants to join up with the Libertarian Alan Buckley and have their own debates around the state. I wonder how that'll come out.
It should come out pretty good because I think that a lot
Two
of
people? Three people?
I think that a lot of voters this time are looking more seriously at third-party candidates, and it's not just a Libertarian; it's a Green Party as well. You see discontent across the political spectrum nationally, particularly with the Democratic and the Republican nominees, and the prospect for the first time, at least in my memory, of a Libertarian getting double-digit.
You know, we say that every election time.
Yeah,
This one's
I've
different.
had
This
that
one's
discussion
different.
with Alan Buckley.
I know, but this one's different.
It doesn't happen.
It's
It doesn't
this one is
happen.
different.
But you know what? This is interesting, Jeff, to your point. I think Dick's right. It's going to drop. Even Ron Paul, the Mr. Libertarian, who ran and has this huge following, he's saying that the party's gone crazy. He does not like the current presidential Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson, who's for open borders and drug legalization. And this guy, Buckley, has some crazy, wacky things. And so if some Republicans are looking to vote Libertarian, they better do their homework.
In the
Well,
meantime,
the other
Johnny
thing is,
Isakson.
yeah, I was going to say, Johnny Isakson is just doing the Hillary Clinton campaign. He's just coasting and cruising. And
He's giving up.
He doesn't
He has
need to.
media availabilities, unlike Hillary, though.
Well,
He'll talk
And he
to the
answers
media.
questions anytime the press wants it. You can call
Yeah,
Johnny
so he's
Isakson.
not like
Looking at
Hillary.
these polls as well. I mean, you know, even some of the more conservative polls are showing that it's a dead heat in the state of Georgia, and this is traditionally
wants
a
to
red
avoid-
state.
You know, that's-
and we don't ordinarily.
He wants to
see
avoid
that.
a runoff at all costs.
Did you see, Jeff, that the
Sure
Associated
does.
Press now has changed its so-called dead heat analysis and now leaning toward Trump? So
By the
things
way,
are moving.
just on Isakson, let's go back before we get to that. And we've got to remember, he is a sitting senator.
Yes.
And he's fighting hard to keep that A-10 plane. That's built by Lockheed, right?
Right, and
And it's the one the ground troops like the best because it's effective at covering
That's right.
troops on the ground.
It's actually one of the key elements in our fight against ISIS over in the Mideast.
But there are no troops on the ground.
It's a huge thing for Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta.
That's the only catch.
And
You don't
Isakson,
need it.
let me finish my point. Isakson, and you can address this, Isakson says that under Obama, these cuts are just killing us. It's cutting us to the bone.
But
And
it's really under the Republican Congress with the cuts
That's not
because
true.
they
They
put
keep
in the
trying to
sequester.
restore. That
and
is not true.
Okay, so that's not what's happening with
All
the
right,
cuts.
now, as
Okay.
Phil said, now let's go to the pure politics of the matter. The Associated Press did move Georgia into the leans Republican.
Leaning Trump.
Yeah, leaning Trump, not, yeah,
Not
I got you.
Republican.
I suspect this is my judgment, the biggest week of the Trump campaign, the week just passed. As he was successful in going to Mexico and seeming to be presidential, he was credible. And then the speech he gave, the fiery speech on immigration, I think he reignited his campaign, and I think a lot of people might have remembered why they supported him in the primaries, Phil.
Well, I think so, and we can talk about this. He'd had some bad weeks about 3 weeks ago. He's had 2 good weeks. I agree with you. The polls have tightened, as we've talked about. In Georgia, he's doing a lot better.
He's margin of error in a
in
lot
the
of
Rust
places.
Belt states, he's doing better, and he's connecting with a lot of people. Maybe to Jeff's point, some of these people that were looking around for the Libertarian. I see in Georgia, just at some of the events, I went to the Pence event, I see a lot of the Marco Rubio and a lot of the Ted Cruz Cruz people coming back home?
I think the die has been cast for Donald Trump. We see who he is. He has told us who he is. He's got a new team now. They're scripting him. They're keeping him a little bit more on message. I think that we saw that with Mexico and all of that. But we still know who he is. The fact of the matter is that the math does not favor Donald Trump. You just don't get there from here. He needs the state of Florida. He doesn't have the state of Florida. He's not even close to getting Florida.
And no matter how,
if he's got to have Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida, and he doesn't have a single one of the three.
We don't know that yet. It's early. We don't know that.
But Alexis, I want to go back to something Phil said. Mike Pence, the vice presidential nominee, was here this week. And he didn't just come to the state. He was here for 2 or 3 days,
right.
2.5 days.
Because they're in trouble and they see it.
If the state was leaning Clinton, I believe Mike Pence's visit here, where he drew pretty appreciative crowds, and he's the anti-Trump.
Yes.
He's the level-headed,
right.
calm governor. He's kind of like Georgia governor.
Legislator.
So I think he's the boring one. Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to say boring.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, both of the vice presidential candidates are boring.
Low key, let's say.
All right. Except the Democratic.
So Alexis, I think Pence
also
went a long way towards shoring up Georgia for the Trump ticket.
I think he shored up the Republicans for the Trump ticket, perhaps, and which would go without saying would carry Georgia.
Well, it shows that they're interested in carrying Georgia. They want to carry Georgia. I mean, if you can't
carry Georgia,
if you can't carry
trouble.
Georgia, you're looking at what we haven't seen in many election cycles, and that's a potential.
Well, if you've looked at the polls,
you look at Georgia, the possibility of North Carolina going the other way, even possibly South Carolina.
I don't know what polls you're looking at, but as of Friday, he has tightened up, and Michigan is certainly in play, and Wisconsin, those Rust Belt states that haven't gone Republican. Florida is dead even, according to the Fox 5 poll of a week or so ago.
But the problem with Trump is that he is Trump. I mean, he'll say one thing off the
Hillary
script
Clinton
and the
is Hillary
teleprompter.
Clinton.
Yes,
her negatives are so far up.
She's the most disliked candidate.
She's totally corrupt, and you ought to at least admit that.
I admit that they're disliked. I don't admit that she's corrupt.
They both have equally high unfavorable.
Let me elicit some howls from this side of the table. I thought Trump's immigration speech was excellent, and I thought that it struck chords with a majority of Americans who consider this immigration a problem. I thought Trump's points, you got to go back.
You want a legal workforce, and he had some. You wanted specifics. You got specifics from E-Verify, which we have here in Georgia, to fixing the visa system.
There was nothing that he listed that hadn't already been put in place by the current administration.
That's not true.
With the exception of giving you a personal interview and asking you, do you
don't have national E-Verify or a better biometric visa system.
We do have
we have sanctuary cities.
We have sanctuary cities.
And what about the interview process about your religious beliefs or your opinions about women and your opinions about abortion?
Well,
and we only want people who come in here who be like us and love us.
Have you ever looked at the citizenship exam? We asked some of those questions of citizens. Why can't we ask those of immigrants and refugees?
We have to get out. Well, let me say, the only real problem with Trump's immigration speech was that he didn't mention birthright citizenship.
But we know where he stands on that.
Didn't he tell the New York Times that he had no intention of building a wall? Who is this guy?
Do you believe the New York Times?
Do you believe Donald Trump?
You believe that guy?
I'll take Trump
You
over
believe
the Times.
Donald Trump?
All right, we got to get
the
out.
guy who claims that he's his own PR.
Well, you're going to be against him no matter what.
Gives a false name and says that he's a PR guy representing Donald Trump, and he is Donald Trump?
It's crazy.
That's enough.
That's
the
your
Democrats
guy.
have the worst nominee in the modern
Republicans
American
have the worst.
political.
Now, you know that you have
judged by
nominated an idiot savant to be president of the United States.
We got to get out.
My God.
You really want 70% of the people hating the president? Which is what will happen if Hillary Clinton is elected. All right, when we come back, winners and losers.
We got that now.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
You know, when we talk presidential politics, they ought to have a fireman off the set with a hose to hose us all down when it's over. Let's begin winners and losers with you, Phil.
All right. Well, my winner is Donald Trump. That was an excellent immigration speech that should appeal to people of all political stripes. And I got a winner. It's called Green Veterans. And Coach Vince Dooley is going to kick off this organization. It's an electrical recycling and resale company, and they've got an event in Roswell this coming Tuesday at the City Hall. And did you know that Vince Dooley is a Marine?
I did know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Right out of Auburn,
until
as I
I saw
recall.
that press release. So Green veterans. And then finally, David Scott, the black Democrat congressman, is my winner. And this is very rare. Get a load of this. He actually wrote a $1,000 check to a black Republican congresswoman, his colleague, Mia Love of Utah. I thought that was a nice gesture. He said, we need some black Republicans.
I missed that. Good for him. Mia Love's an attractive candidate. Let's see. How about Alexis?
Okay, can I use the note that you made about John Lewis?
Sure, go for it.
It was a wonderful, fun event. He was on Colbert late night show, and he did a, what do you call it?
Crowd surfing?
Crowd surfing. And they went, I wasn't sure he was going to do it because he had done it with other guests on the show that night, and he went, and the people just loved it, and he loved it, and they took him all the way from the front to the back of the audience.
See, that's what you can get away with when you're in a monopoly situation. John Lewis is a congressman for life. Now, at his age, if he does that again, we got to check his sanity, because they got a lot of people throwing you around in the air. That's at his age not a good thing.
No, but it was
all right,
beautiful.
We got to get out quickly, Jeff.
Georgetown University is a winner for really taking history into their own hands, acknowledging the history where slavery is concerned and their role in it. 272 slaves who were sold to raise the equivalent of $3 million in the 1800s. Hats off to Georgetown University and your
Alma mater.
Your alma mater,
I know a lot about that.
and the steps that they're taking to acknowledge their own history. I wish that we could do it as a nation. And along the same vein, Colin Kaepernick, the NFL quarterback.
No.
I really admire his courage and the stance that he's taking.
Well, he's going to enjoy his stint.